Okay, so let's jump right in. For any A-level essay on the early Soviet state, this is really the question you have to get your head around. Was the Red Terror just a reluctant, panicked reaction to the chaos of civil war, or was it actually baked into the Bolshevik system from the very beginning?
In this guide, we're going to break down all the evidence you need to build a really top-tier argument. We're going to look at the Cheka, what it did, its methods, and its legacy, all to help you structure a killer analysis for your exams.
So, we've got a 5-part roadmap. We'll kick things off with the timing of the Cheka's creation. Then we'll dissect the organization itself. After that, we'll examine its official methods, look at its most extreme actions, and finally, we'll get into the historical debate you absolutely need to know for your essays.
Right. Section 1. The core argument we're exploring here is that the Bolsheviks always planned to use terror as a tool of the state. You know, this wasn't some kind of improvisation they came up with later. It was part of the blueprint from the get-go. Now, you've really got to pay close attention to the timing on this slide because it's crucial. The Cheka was founded in December 1917. Think about that. That's just a few weeks after the October Revolution, and most importantly, it's before the Civil War really exploded. For your essay, this timing is your smoking gun. It's powerful evidence that terror was part of the state's design, not just a reaction to a crisis.
And this quote, wow, it tells you everything about the mindset at the very top. This is Lenin, in his own words, demanding that terror be used as a public spectacle, as a tool for intimidation. And check out the date. This was sent before the Red Terror was even officially decreed. It's more proof of a pre-existing commitment to state-sponsored violence.
So, how did they put this ideology into practice? Well, to get that, we need to look at the Cheka not just as an idea, but as a real, functioning, and incredibly powerful institution.
Okay, so here's the official definition. The Cheka was the very first of the Soviet secret police forces, and its leader, Felix Dzerzhinsky, known as Iron Felix, was a true ideological fanatic. He wasn't some kind of sadist who enjoyed cruelty for its own sake. No, what made him so dangerous was that he saw mass killing as a regrettable but totally necessary tool for building communism. He was systematic. And the scale of this operation was just immense. By 1921, 200,000 people worked for the Cheka. It had branches everywhere, these so-called gub-checkers, which often acted with terrifying independence. This wasn't a small group of enforcers. This was a sprawling nationwide machine of repression.
Now, we get to a crucial point. The Cheka's violence wasn't just random chaos. For your essays, it's absolutely vital to show how specific methods of terror were systematized, how they were written right into official state policy. This slide is key. These weren't just improvised measures in a war zone. Hostage-taking was a codified official policy. Execution without trial was explicitly allowed, which created this whole parallel legal system where the Cheka was judge, jury, and executioner, all in one. They set up the very first concentration camps, the direct ancestors of the Gulag system, and while torture wasn't officially on the books, it was a routine, everyday part of the process.
And then came the official rubber stamp. The decree on Red Terror in September 1918 made it all formal. It wasn't just about fighting enemies on the battlefield anymore. It was about using terror to secure the rear, as the decree itself said. This unleashed a massive wave of executions and made mass intimidation the official law of the land.
So we've seen the system, we've seen the rulebook. Now let's look at how it was applied in the most extreme circumstances. These are the powerful case studies you can use in your analysis.
These two examples are just devastating. Decossacization wasn't about targeting individual enemies. It was a policy aimed at literally eliminating an entire social group that was deemed hostile to Soviet power. And then you have the Tambo Uprising. The main civil war was pretty much over by this point, and yet the Red Army used chemical weapons against its own people, against peasants. This shows you the absolute peak of the Red Terror's brutality.
Okay, so to push your essay into that top grade band, you can't just list the facts. You have to engage with how historians have actually debated these events over the years.
So this slide lays out the two main camps. On one side, you have the totalitarian school, with historians like Richard Pipes. They argue that everything we've just seen was a deliberate, predictable result of Marxist-Leninist ideology. On the other side, you have the revisionist school, with historians like J. Arch Getty, who counter that the terror was often more of a chaotic, desperate reaction to the incredible pressures of civil war. Knowing these two positions is absolutely essential.
And all of this brings us to the ultimate question, the one that every great essay on this topic has to wrestle with. What exactly is the link between the terror of Lenin and the terror of Stalin?
Here's a quick breakdown of how that debate shakes out. The continuity thesis says Stalin simply scaled up the machine of terror that Lenin had already built. The discontinuity thesis argues that Stalin's terror was something totally different, a unique break driven by his own paranoia. Funnily enough, this was the official line in the Soviet Union for decades. It was a way to protect Lenin's legacy from the so-called mistakes of Stalinism. And then there's a middle position, from historians like Robert Service, who argue that, yeah, Lenin created the system, but Stalin took it in a new, more self-destructive direction.
And that is the question I'm going to leave you with. By creating the Cheka, by sanctioning its brutal methods, by defending its necessity, did Lenin lay the inevitable groundwork for the Gulag? Was Stalin's Great Terror some kind of monstrous aberration, or was it simply the revolution following its own brutal logic all the way to the very end? That is what you have to decide.